Mike McMillan is the founder and publisher of the Northshore Prep Report, and the Northshore had two teams in the quarterfinals last night between Franklinton and Jewel Sumner. And Mike, if we'll start with Division II non-select, where the Demons gave a really good game to the top seeded North Dakota Griffin.
Yeah, Marshall, it was get your popcorn ready and fireworks ready. I think there was over 60 points scored in the first half, which was pretty impressive. And North DeSoto breaks out to a 14-0 lead, and it looked like they were going to score 100 points on the night. And surprisingly enough, in the entire game, and I would say even early, it really wasn't Luke Delafield. It was the running backs, Thomas and Layton, who were just, gashing the Franklinton defense in the middle. But I have to give Franklinton a lot of credit. They're down 14-0. It looks like the world's going to end. And, Superman Jacob Crane does Jacob Crane things, and they drive right down the field and they score a touchdown and get back in the game. And they go to halftime 37-31, I believe it was, or 37-30. And they came out in the second half, and I thought it was probably the best defensive half that Franklinton's had all season. Delafield, he's an incredible quarterback, and I look forward to that matchup with him and Crane so much. But where I was more impressed with anything was just the Franklinton defense kind of making that North DeSoto passing game a non-factor. It really was. Now, what that meant was North DeSoto was able to run the ball, but the adjustments that Franklinton made at halftime, being able to stop the run, were just incredible. And, it was two heavyweights going back and forth. I listened to all your show this morning, and, it's another one of those where you hear the names and, it's the last time you're going to cover these guys. And it's a bummer because you feel like you're close to these kids and these programs. But it was a great night, for Franklinton football, traveling to North DeSoto. That game, it's a 14-point game, the end, but it's tied in the fourth quarter. And Franklinton had a couple shots there with the ball late to go make plays or to get back in it, tie it up. And North DeSoto defense makes a couple good plays. I wrote in our preview that I thought in order for Franklinton to win the game, they'd have to run the ball well, which they did. Raiden Rayburn, at running back, and Ricardo Buras made a couple of big plays too. They ran the ball, pretty well, and I thought they needed turnovers. They intercepted 3 balls last night. So, and I spotlighted Jakeem McLean, who's incredible. He's DeMicus McLean's brother. So there's a household full of pretty good athletes. But,
wow.
Jakeem made a couple big plays last night, and they had 3 turnovers. They made some stops. I mean, North DeSoto, it felt like they had the ball 100 times last night. I don't know how many plays they ran. It probably wasn't that many because they had some big hitting plays. But the second half was just an absolutely phenomenal football game. I mean, the first half was too. It was a tale of two halves and kind of how it went.
Let's jump to Sumner Calvary real quick, and then I want to get back and kind of ask you some more general questions about your reporting this year. But Sumner and Calvary, that's a wing T versus kind of you might call it a pro style offense that Calvary brought, and one, in my opinion, leading into the game, one of the best quarterfinal matchups, that 3-6 matchup.
Yeah, and it didn't disappoint, Marshall. I mean, Calvary got out to a 14-0 lead early. Might have been in the first quarter. And, I'll tell you what I think the difference was in the game. Calvary did a phenomenal job of limiting the big chunk plays. Sumner's had, that wing T offense, it's not really, and I wrote this in our preview yesterday, it's not really a methodical wing T, 3 to 5 yards and kind of get back in the huddle and do it again. Jamon Dyson and Jeremiah Brooks and Jakari Brown, those kids have made, 60, 70, 80-yard runs all season. And it just didn't happen last night. And you're just kind of waiting for it to happen. And, instead it was 12 to 15-yard gains. And, Sumner would get in their territory and kind of bog down a little bit. But I thought the difference was really, Calvary's ability to tackle in open space was massive. I thought they did that as well as I've seen a team do that all year. And they really shut down Jeremiah Brooks kind of up the middle on those traps and zones and X's that they would run out of the fullback position. So it was really an interesting game. It was an incredible defensive football game. Now, Jewel Sumner kind of had to throw the ball more than they have all year. And it's not that they didn't throw it because they couldn't, but, they didn't need to. They ran the ball so well. But Eli Nealon, he could throw it. They had a couple opportunities where, defense made a really good play or, something crazy happened. But, they had the ball. They're driving, I think, less than a minute left. It's 4th and 9. And I think Nealon hits Dyson on like an 8-yard gain. They're a yard short in ending the game. But the whole game, Marshall, I just kind of felt like, okay, it's about to break open. Sumner's about to break this thing open. Sumner's about to break this thing open. And Calvary never let it happen. But, and I have to say this, Hudson Price and that crew, Braylon Huglin is phenomenal receiver for Calvary. This game was all about Ryan Miles. Like 5'5", 190. He looked every bit of it. He's powerful. He's athletic. He's quick. He reminds me a lot of Jamyron Dillon at A-Meet, kind of similar size. But phenomenal game by Calvary on defense. Great season by Sumner. Phenomenal run for them in Coach career. They've lost 3 games in the last 2 seasons. And they've ended the last 2 seasons in the quarterfinals. So, it hurts, I'm sure. But, these kids and these parents and the community will look back on this program, years from now, remember what a great ride that was for 2 years.
And that's kind of where I want to end it with you, and we'll let you get back to driving here. But these 2 programs in particular, they're the last 2 standing on, from the 985. But you mentioned Franklinton being a heavyweight earlier. You just mentioned Jewel Sumner, over 20 wins combined the past 2 seasons, including an undefeated regular season. What does it say about those 2 programs that aren't in the big metro areas? It's not like they're, right in the middle of Mandeville or right there in Slidell where there's just 5A talent everywhere. But just your thoughts on Franklinton and Jewel Sumner in particular, building programs under those, really talented and knowledgeable coaches.
Yeah, Marshall, I think of it in 2 words. And to me, in those communities, it's coaching and culture. And those coaches do such a phenomenal job of creating the right culture for them to be successful. They have a different group of kids. They're in rural areas. Now, look, every high school coach will tell you that it takes some luck, right? You need those 2 classes to be pretty good. You need, some linemen to be pretty good, and you need some athletes. And they've had the perfect recipe. But I'll say this, both of those programs, and look, I'll throw, Lakeshore in the mix, I'll throw St. Paul's in the mix. I'll throw some other schools in there, but, they're just going to reload because of coaching and the culture. Those kids now that they know what winning looks like, it's no longer you're hoping to win. In those places, when you lose, it's devastating because they're just not expecting to lose. And to me, that's the biggest win you can have, right? If you're a parent and you send your kid to a school, you want a coach to care about them, checks the box. You want a competitive program, it checks the box. You want accountability, it checks the box. And you want to expect to win because you're teaching your kids that that's the approach that they're going to have the rest of their lives. And it's paid off, in big dividends in both those places and some more places on the North Shore. But I couldn't be more proud. It's been a phenomenal season, covering those guys. We will, transition to the South Shore next week, and we'll have a bunch of previews for those games with, the Catholic League and Curtis and St. Aug rematch and Catholic Carr. It doesn't get much better than that. I've got to give Coach Stein at St. Charles, a bunch of credit. They went with Edie White, got a big win, big shutout. You got Vanderbilt Catholic back in it again. St. James with a win. You got a bunch of teams. Lutcher with that young quarterback. I know you know a little bit about this game, but they lose by a touchdown to Iowa. That's an impressive game by Lutcher, and they had a phenomenal season for that group. But lots of good football going around, man. Appreciate what you do. I've listened this morning. I'll be listening this afternoon and following up around the state. And look, I've got to say this. We talk a lot about Division I Select, but how about North Louisiana Division I non-select? I mean, good gosh almighty. We talk about the Catholic League and the run that people have to go through, but, it's not much different up there.
Yeah, we may just have Rustin and Neville in the finals there in the Superdome. Mike,
Look, I would like that.
Yeah, me too. Mike done just an undescribably good job with the North Shore and the South Shore as well this season. I'm sure I'll be following all week long to see kind of how you recap some of these football teams and keep it rolling. So check out the North Shore Prep Report. You can go to northshoreprepreport.com, or you can just find them anywhere on your favorite social channel. Mike McMillan, he does a fantastic job, him and his crew, Roger Glenn and everyone down there with covering those programs. And Mike, thanks so much for taking some time while you're driving to help recap some games with us this morning.
Thanks, Marshall. I know we'll get together soon. For everybody, we're going to do some basketball stuff here soon. And
yep.
look, as devastated as I am when a football team's done for the season, I have to think that some basketball teams just got a little bit better too. So it's it's a full circle space in the high school sport world. That's for sure.
Well, look, you've been a part of making some of these heavyweight programs heavyweight by letting everyone around the state know how good they are. So it's much appreciated, and so is your time this morning.
I appreciate it, Marshall. Thanks for everything you do and having us on, brother.
Yep. Have a good Saturday.
You too, my man.
Thanks to